A pleasure to meet y'all at last, and welcome back to, well, some more films I should have talked about years ago. More importantly, welcome to what I can pretty much propose to be an ending to a marathoning session that I have for today, here on this series. So you know what? Combined with Honest J. Nowak, as well as some Face Cam Specials Insurgents, The Enlightening Venture episodes, I sure am going to be busy for the time, but at this moment, let's go ahead and simply address a lot of things based on another film that I got to talk about for today. Because let's go ahead and talk a bit about Transformers. Yeah, you're probably sick of me talking about it. I talked about The Last Knight. I've talked about Bumblebee. What other films out there could there be that I haven't talked about before? Well, believe it or not, I have not really talked a lot about Transformers Prime Beast Hunters Predacons Rising from 2013. Yeah, you know what? This was one that I did talk briefly about, but only briefly. I never got to be very specific about it like I probably should have. And a lot of other details have pretty much been missed. So, after 8 years, now's the time where I come back and talk about this film entirely. It's a film that I may have talked about years ago, but only for a short while. Now let's talk about it in full, in depth, and hopefully get some closure on it. It was released in October 2013, a few months after the final episode of the final season of Transformers Prime came out, which was at the time known as Transformers Prime Beast Hunters. It was a brand new tangent for Transformers Prime because in 2013, when it turned into Beast Hunters, the series basically gave a whole new perspective on the whole entire continuity as a whole. It basically went from being a reboot series that was completely CG animated in 2010 and 2011 and 2012 up until the point where it eventually ended up turning into Beast Hunters. It became a point where the series would eventually get even bigger and supposedly even better, mostly with the merchandising. Especially because Transformers Prime was already becoming quite a big marketing tool in terms of merchandising. It even got itself a couple of new video games, for the most part. And I have tried a couple of them out before. Let's just say they're a bit cheesy for what they were. But anyways, Beast Hunters ended with Megatron falling from the ship that had cyber matter that was indeed capable of bringing anything back to life and terraforming a planet in their favor. When the Autobots ended up winning that battle, they took the ship over with the cyber matter, threw it all into Cybertron, and it apparently rebirthed and was able to have life all over again. So, that was quite a satisfying ending right there to such a good series. But then comes the movie, Predacons Rising. It gives us a natural continuation, taking place almost immediately after the series, where the Autobots are all together on planet Cybertron. Optimus Prime basically gives us a speech on how Bumblebee was able to rescue everybody from certain doom from Megatron back there above Earth, and with so many other things that had taken place, Bumblebee is now a true warrior. Meanwhile, though, Megatron's corpse is sitting at the bottom of the ocean and somehow gets resurrected with the power of Unicron, whom, if you're familiar with the series, was trapped within the Earth's core. And the thing is that in terms of how things are at that point, Unicron basically addresses how an ancient rival had awakened across the cosmos, whom of course was Primus. And after quite a big conflict happens, Megatron and Unicron agree to go through together to basically stop the Autobots from bringing in life on Earth. However, though, it eventually comes to terms that Unicron attempts to try and overtake Megatron's body just so Cybertron itself could be eradicated. But it is certainly important to note that with everybody else in line, from Shockwave and Starscream to the Predacons themselves, which eventually turned out to be Predaking combined with two other newer Predacons, Darksteel and Sky Lynx. So, And yeah, for the record, this new Skylynx, of course, was different than the original G1 version. From a space shuttle and a little cruiser that turns into a lynx and a bird, we get ourselves a Predacon that basically does have some similar adaptations going on, but doesn't really seem to be anywhere close to being like the actual Skylynx we've known throughout G1 history. But it certainly is important to note that aside from the unbelievable plot that takes place, to the horrifying action that gives us that edgy feeling of, well, this is how most modern kids shows would probably have been like. It certainly was geared towards kids, but it is certainly something that everybody could enjoy. I really would compare it to something that's in a similar caliber, like in the real Ghostbusters, for example, which was all the way back in the 1980s, as well as the Batman animated series from the 90s. I mean, there are a lot of shows, even to this very day, that happen to be in that same exact sort of caliber, with a very dark, sinister sort of tone taking place, with action, adventure, shootouts, and all that good stuff, that really does relate to things like modern warfare and terrorism, as well as ecological takeover, and so many other things, pretty much. But I really do have to say, though, if there's actually a couple things that I really do like about this film entirely, it's the fact that, well, aside from the kind of things like the action, the theming, and the connectivity to that of the original series, which came out sometime before then, I really gotta like the cast. And I could really just name as many of the names as, at the top of my head as I possibly could. You got Peter Cullen and Frank Welker, whom were already well known in the G1 series for voicing Optimus and Megatron, and they come back basically to reprise their roles nearly 30 years later. And then of course you have Will Friedle, Sumali Montano, Kevin Michael Richardson, Jeffrey Combs, Nolan North, Steve Blum, David Sobolov, Peter Mensah, and so many others out there. I mean, it's just crazy. You even have the famous Darren Norris, who comes by to play the character Knockout. And man, I really gotta say, that was crazy right there, when Knockout apparently betrays the Decepticons to join in with the Autobots. Like, wow, like that was amazing right there. I mean, it did happen at first during the climax of the series itself, at the last episode, but then of course, well, Knockout really makes it clear about actually joining in on the Autobots. This time, with more seriousness in mind. So, it of course does end in the destruction of the Immobilizer, which of course had been used to put all the Autobots in stasis from the show, but was then destroyed because of Knockout using it to knock out Starscream. Man, like that was incredible. So anyways, the ending of course is probably the best one to really pack it in deep, because it does in fact feature an entire army of reawoken Decepticon armies brought on by Unicron, intended to basically take out anything that gets in their way. The main thing though is that these new fully awoken Decepticon army and soldiers are basically there to fly into the core of Cybertron and basically eradicate it, just as Unicron would originally intend. And then of course there goes the conflict that goes between Optimus and Megatron, with Optimus trying to get Megatron to respond, but then of course, oh man, like you really gotta know that this is quite a lot of things, that these are a lot of details to really, really pay attention to, because this film's just all out impressively done. For something that came out in 2013 as a film adaptation of the series, and as a sequel to that of the series itself, it really does give you that feeling that you're watching something from the show. It's like when the Power Rangers basically went from the series to the movie in the 90s. And then in the 60s, you have the Batman from the 60s going to the film at the same time that the series pretty much took place for the first time. So, I mean, it is common for some shows to eventually go on to feature film productions. I, of course, remember that even I myself have done the same thing. I did Nerf Secret Reveal between 2013 and 2020, and then in January 2021, I went ahead and released a feature film adaptation based off the series. So, history repeats, pretty much, in that magnitude. So by any means, I suggest anybody out there, go ahead and watch this film. It is incredible, to say the least. It really captures that feeling you get by any kind of Transformers fans that are around. And with so much more that you could be on the lookout for, how could you ever go wrong with it? How can any of that stuff get old? Well, these days, it's even hard for me to actually adjust to it, because with such a big film out there, such a big partake in any of this, I don't necessarily know what could be comparable to it. Well, you know what? Time to give it a scoring. For all these impressive merits that have taken place, I really gotta say, in combination with the animation, the detailing, the casting, the plot, the natural continuation that had taken place, quite a blender of that size does require quite a big score. And with that, 8.6 out of 10 is basically the official scoring that I give to Transformers Prime Beast Hunters Predacons Rising from October 2013. And so, that pretty much just concludes that whole part right there as a whole. But you know what though? I'm probably going to be doing a whole lot more though than just all this. So if you want to see more, go down to my channel. Then make sure that you like, subscribe, comment, follow me on social media, and stay on the Hollywood side.